as we are done officially with the speakers, so I'd like to open the floor for any questions audiences might have. All right. Any questions?
Well, as you think about your questions, I'll have a few questions for our panel myself. Tim, we talked here about having collaboration among really competitors, and as I've become exposed to SEMA, I know that SEMA companies are among the most competitive of any industry. So how did you find ways to collaborate, but at the same time, protect your own interests, protect your own intellectual property?
Yeah, I think, first of all, to your point, yeah, any industry built on racing is going to be pretty competitive with each other, but most of it is finding like-minded manufacturers, and at the end of the day, there's much more at stake here than simple competitive advantage. We are able, through the collaboration of SEMA, to have our own data. I know in our case, we've shared that data with multiple manufacturers to no direct advantage of our own. But again, that the theory of the rising tide really applies here because, yes, we all want that competitive advantage, but again, there's much more at stake here. We've accomplished one goal thus far, and collaboration is key in doing that. And everything we've talked about is centered on 126 and stability control, but there's so much more beyond just over the hill, and it's coming. And the collaborative effort that we've started here is what will help us answer those problems of tomorrow.
Melanie, could I ask you the same question?
Yeah, I think Tim covered it really well. While we are in a very competitive environment, we're able to share this with SEMA being the neutral ground. If we didn't have SEMA as the neutral ground, I think it would be very difficult for us to participate in something like this.
Any other comments from the speakers?
Yep, if you could maybe give us a one-line summary about your participation in the program and how it's either been a benefit to your company or how you see moving forward in the future with SEMA members. Or start with you.
Well, we're kind of the new guys on the block here, I guess. So we just recently joined. So I would say we basically overlap with a number of the other folks here. And we also use some of the services. Bob's Morse Measurements, for example, has done a number of measurements for us on our projects. We work with CarSim. We work with Terry here on projects. He does some work for us on some of our projects. And so we all help one another, and as well as in times we compete. And I think that's kind of similar to what some of the SEMA members do. You talked about the competition, but at the same time, we find ways to work together as well in our businesses. And there are ways to do that. So that would be my take on it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Terry?
Yeah, to add what Rick was saying, just today before our presentation, I met with another SEMA member partner company here, and we had a discussion, and I did not know that they have a capability that I'm looking for with another company to quote on a project that I'm currently working on. And it was pretty exciting to learn that they had the capability, so we'll be working together hopefully in this new project.
Santosh?
Yeah, I'm going to take a slightly different spin to answer your question. Something that we didn't talk too much about, but we hinted at, was the OEM involvement. And that OEM world is the world that I work in primarily, and that's been a success of the program as well. I remember those meetings we had at Ford with Tim and Greg and working with Ford that John brokered to get Ford to participate, and getting past that point where the OEM saw an aftermarket company as a competitor, right? Where that light bulb went off and said, wow, a lot of our end customers are paying for these modifications, and it behooves us to assist the aftermarket in whatever way we can to enable that consumer still has a safe vehicle that preserves features and that they can enjoy the benefits of that aftermarket product. And the collaboration with Chrysler, for example, when we did the Ram recently, we saw a further level of not just providing information, but true collaboration. And talking to Jim, it generated value for him because he could see some of the requirements that aftermarket was going to impose on his factory systems, and he can actually take that requirement into his next discussions with his ESC supplier, right? Knowing that that Ram's going to get modified and that he knows now here is the envelope of conditions that system needs to support, because it's important that they do that. And so I think that was breaking that wall of potential competitiveness between OEM and aftermarket. I think that's definitely been a key benefit, and one I'd like to see continue to build.
Tom, do you have any comment?
Yeah, the fact that we are simulation people doesn't mean that we're the only simulation people. You see a lot of that around here, and it is, I think, in everybody's benefit to have to work with your competition. It's kind of that old story that in a town with only one lawyer, the lawyer will starve, right? You need at least somebody else around to work with. So as I look at what's going on here, I think it is to your advantage to have competitors in here working with you, because left alone, you probably won't be able to survive, considering the way the world is changing so boldly and so dramatically. Cars are so much different every year. It just is so amazing. And so you really need to have other people who are trying to go to the same place you are and pool your resources to make it possible.
Bob?
Yeah, I think as a small company, it's been a great benefit for Morse Measurements to be able to work with a great group like SEMA and become more involved in the aftermarket. And I think it's been mutually beneficial to be able to generate this data and get it into the car simulation. And we certainly look forward to doing a lot more work with you guys, and appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with you all today.
As a student, it's been a great opportunity for me to work with SEMA, to be involved with real projects. It's given a good motivation for me for my PhD research too. So it's been awesome in that respect. But in general, I think one of the key issues for the aftermarket industry is this really small duration and small resources that they have. And we are trying to compete with the OEM world, where they have so many more resources. So it's really it's a really cool thing that SEMA is bringing all of us together, so that we are providing them standalone solutions which can provide them really quick outputs without having an extremely big lineage of resources in general. So I think it's a great opportunity there.
Yeah.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I might add a comment too, in relating to the fact that there is quite a collection of knowledge here. I mean, I've looked at Mandar's development as a PhD student there at Clemson, and been rather impressed with the kind of students they're turning out, and Ed Browalski's early experience in developing automotive control systems, and Link Engineering, and Altair, and D-Space, all of these, and now we have the help of KNC people, the people that really have made it to be a very, very special team of people that are sitting here on this stage today.
One of the things I've noticed is that in the last, I think this program's been going about 4 or 5 years, all I ever see here, I've seen one company, that was in springs and shocks. There's been really relatively few, very limited participation. I don't see anybody from engine performance companies or any sort of stuff like this, and yet it seems like they ought to be involved. And the other question was, we've had essentially 3 different approaches to certifying to 126. One being the hardware and simulation, the other being maybe a pure simulation, and the third being physical testing. And how does a company in any of the areas here figure out which way it has to go?
I'll take a stab at that. We've been pretty successful, I think, with the SEMA approach, especially in the last 24 months, with some additional manufacturers really coming on and supporting the program. But depending on which approach you take, is a question that the company, you have to ask yourself what you want. Are you looking for certification, self-certification on a specific platform? Do you want the flexibility to test multiple parameters, tire wheel combinations, all those kinds of things, because that's very important. It's one that is very hard to do with physical testing. Although physical testing does answer the immediate need. And then pure simulation, again, you have to take a little leap of faith in your parameters, right? So, it's a question. I don't know that there is a right answer. And in fact, I don't think there is a specific answer that's right. It's for a company having to weigh the options there and determine what is best for them. But again, I think the benefit here that SEMA has done is to put a panel like this, excluding myself, but guys here that have the knowledge and can discuss the ins and outs of that and how it would affect and what would be best for your specific company.
Maybe to add what Tim had to say, anytime you run a test, the first question you should ask yourself is, what am I going to do with the information? Mm-hmm. Like if you just want to certify one vehicle configuration or one variant, then go run a physical test. If you want to use that information to eventually quantify several models or several variants, then you'll use that data to add to models, then you should go the modeling path.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that as well. When you're early in a program, so you're an OEM, you don't have a physical prototype, you don't have a physical hardware. So you have to do things with simulation to try to do predictive analysis to determine whether or not your product is going to meet all the requirements that it has to meet, both regulatory and for your customers. As you work your way up kind of the ladder of abstraction and you get hardware, then you can do it in hardware and you can validate your simulation models in hardware. And many times you guys have the hardware already, right? You have the vehicle that you're trying to modify, but in some cases you may not, especially vehicles that have just recently been redesigned, like the new Silverado, for example, for 2014. You want to come out with products for that vehicle. You want to assure yourself that it can meet 126 or can give you the characteristics in the vehicle that you want. So simulation may be the only way that you can do it to have a competitive advantage, over your competitors, if you can get all the input data, obviously. And what I'm hearing from Mandar and others is that the OEMs are becoming much more cooperative about handing some of that data over to the to the SEMA members. So it all depends on what the situation is, what tool you use in the toolbox.
In answer to your first question about the participation, the impetus for the start of this whole activity within SEMA was FMVSS 126. The most obvious companies affected by 126 are lift kit manufacturers. And then as you start getting more into things that change the handling characteristics, and that's who our primary participants have been, and they've been motivated by legal issues that may arise from the regulation being in place. But that's part of the reason for our topic today is to try to gain more exposure and to explain that these tools can be used for a lot more than just keeping your lawyers happy. However, you do have to keep the lawyers happy, and if your first and only motivation is to have a demonstration that this kit is going to still comply with 126, physical tests make a lot of sense. If you want to look at variations of that, though, now you have to have information such as K&C data and say, okay, this kit, I can go this far with that kit in modifying things to offer options on it. So, and that would lead you to simulation, particularly hardware in the loop would be the best for something like that. And then pure simulation may be best for new products, but it may also be best for doing a evaluation of something that you have a minor change to from something you already know passes 126. Yeah. So I don't think there is just one solution, as was pointed out, and that what we really want to do is provide sort of a menu. And the idea would be that the SEMA member company would talk to CUICAR, to me, and just help determine exactly what you want to do, what are the goals of your participation in the program, and quite frankly, what is your budget as well. So from that, I think we can help provide direction through SEMA for what needs to be done, and then the service companies are there to offer their expertise and capabilities as you need it.
I'd like to add one comment. So, because we've talked about these three methods and we've talked about pure simulation, hardware in the loop. So one point to clarify is that the models of the vehicle that are running in pure simulation are the same models that are running in the hardware in the loop simulation. Yeah. The key difference is that in hardware in the loop, we're connecting to the real electronics, a real control system, whereas that is simulated in the pure simulation. And you go through those two methods depending on where you're at. So there's an awful lot that can be gained by running, for example, the CarSim tools on your PC and run pure simulation to get an understanding of what will the dynamic behavior be of the vehicle with this particular configuration, right? If I raise a CG, if I change these parameters, and you can get highly sophisticated and highly complex. And when you get to the point of saying, okay, now I need to understand how will software and electronics impact this picture, that's when the hardware in the loop system becomes a viable option. And ultimately, if you're looking to see how does my product impact this intended vehicle platform, then that's a point that you might go through. I think Mandar touched on a very key challenge, because you folks are always designing product for vehicles that are coming out. You don't have the luxury of a 5-year development window. You have 1 year, right? And then you have to hit your peak sales and then prepare for the next one, right? And the OEMs, when they're launching new programs, they do a significant amount of development on the previous programs as well. An ESC system from 1 year to the next is not drastically different. It's a fairly commoditized, piece of equipment, and Ed can speak to that, and I'm sure Rick can speak to that, being at the OEM side. And so they do a significant amount of development on current generation to even get an understanding of when to apply to the next vehicles when they're actually available to generate. And I think that's a viable path to think in the aftermarket world as well. To look at how maybe even in the hardware in the loop scenario, maybe not waiting till that next vehicle comes out. And there could be pros and cons to that, but I think it is viable.
I think there's one other aspect to this that we haven't touched on, and that's research. And it's one thing to use simulation to develop just a pure new product to go with a new vehicle. But the other thing simulation allows you to do is a lot of what-if studies. Yep. And to explore new ideas that you have for new products on sort of a generic platform, so that you can hit the ground really running with a well-researched product when that new vehicle comes along that you want to modify.
To answer your first question, there has been substantial interest by the engine modifiers regarding how it affects the, let's say, the emissions, or how does it affect the other control systems. And throughout this week, we'll have several announcements from SEMA regarding SEMA's initiative towards those actions. You have a question?
I want to add a little bit to what I think, excuse me, I wanted to add a little bit, I think what I heard the gentleman ask, from somebody that comes from the automotive environment in a supplier of slip control systems, I see the side that we're talking about, and there's an incredible amount of complexity and there's an incredible amount of development. When I walk through the show as somebody who may be either applying or designing a product to be applied to an OE vehicle, the ambiguity as to whether I'm responsible to certify that or whether I'm responsible to pick something that's certified to that. What is my ownership of the final development of the vehicle? I think that's the question I hear from him. So I think the tools that we have here really get into when you accept the ownership of that certification. But there may be some questions, and maybe you've been doing this for 4 years, I guess, now, so maybe in a previous version there was a template that said, if you're doing this, your legal responsibilities are this. And if you're just to purchase, here's what you want to go purchase. But I don't know if that was what the gentleman was asking. I've been trying to read FMVN 126, and when it talks about modifying a car after a certain amount, are you updating a VIN number? Are you building it from scratch? There's that framework of where do I exist in that modification world, and what's my ownership of certification. So if you've already done that, that might be something that would be really interesting for people and might help answer that question. But so just a little, what am I hearing from out here?
Well, again, this originally was motivated by GM legal, by SEMA legal staff, and they saw that because of FMVSS 126, the kits that were being applied to vehicles that already certified, that's who's going to be responsible for it. Now, we had quite a bit of discussion early on, would that be the final installer or the supplier of the kits? And the conclusion was made that the supplier of the kits had a primary responsibility. Now, that's an interpretation of 126, but really your question is best answered by SEMA's legal staff. Stuart Goswine in particular?
Yeah, when I read 126, it says if you either manufacture or modify a vehicle, you're responsible. So in my interpretation, and I'm not arguing that. Yeah. I guess what we say when we look at the dynamics, there's a lot of people that, the great comment, I love the comment about the lawyers, right? Because now we've got two, so we're going to exist, right? But point being that ultimately, as a supplier, the risk that you bear by supplying a part to someone that doesn't understand that legal, you can see where that cascades down to the supplier or up to the supplier if we want to talk about size modifier. But point being, I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. Where are they crossing the line to where they need to engage this? And then as you get to a larger person with more resources that wants to do more development and design, how do we use the tools? So I think there's that segmentation of what are people doing. So
your question is a very valid one, and something that I know a lot of the suppliers are struggling with is from the legal standpoint. But one of the points that we're trying to make today is that these tools can be very affordable for a small company, particularly in a collaborative approach, and that they can offer more than just certification of your compliance with 126.
Right. So
I saw John there. I thought he was going to.
Just point out that most shops that would install these kits have garage keepers liability and legal liability insurance, and they have enough insurance so that no insurance company wants to pay off. So the final suit will then be subvented to the supplier of the kit. That's my understanding, but I'm not a lawyer.